Let me ask you something real quick. Have you ever worried that you're not eating enough or maybe eating enough of the right things postpartum to keep up your milk supply? If so, you are so not alone. And today we are about to challenge some of the big myths that might be keeping us stuck in stress, confusion, or even guilt around postpartum nutrition and breastfeeding. I'm sitting down with perinatal nutritionist Brooke Harmer to unpack why eating cleaner might not help your milk supply, what your body actually needs to thrive while nursing, and how to fuel your postpartum season from a place of freedom and not of fear. So if you are ready to ditch the pressure and truly support your body and your baby, this episode could change everything. So let's dive in.
Postpartum is hard. One second we feel like our bodies are miraculous, and the next we feel like we're a complete mess, out of touch with the strong, confident women we used to be, all while the fitness industry pressures us to bounce back as quickly as possible to a body that never looked like it was pregnant to begin with. That's why, whether we're 3 days postpartum or 3 years postpartum, we need the refreshing truth of gospel-focused fitness to give us energy for the physical challenges of motherhood, peace with our postpartum bodies, and kingdom-centered motivation to train for strength and stamina. So mama, whether you're sipping on cold coffee or folding 5-day-old laundry, I pray by listening every Monday, you become equipped, encouraged, and empowered for a strong motherhood, all for God's glory. This is the Strong After Birth podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Brooke, thanks so much for coming on the show. I'm so glad to have you on and grateful for your time here. Could you say hi to the audience? Introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us about who you are and what you do.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I am super excited to be here, especially on a faith-based podcast. I don't get to talk about my faith very often, so this is really exciting. My name is Brooke. I'm a certified perinatal nutritionist and soon to be mom of 3. I'm due with my 3rd baby any day now. And my passion is helping moms thrive in every stage of motherhood. I didn't realize that that was my passion until after I had my first baby, where I was just totally in the dark. I was like handheld all the way through pregnancy and childbirth. And then they're like, "Okay, sweet, go home. You're good to go." And I was like, wait, but like, I don't know what's going on.
Right, right.
And all the things that I had been doing prior to having a baby, all of a sudden, like, didn't really work anymore. Like, I didn't feel good. My milk supply was kind of struggling. And I had postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety and just like, you name it, like all the things that we think are normal. And I was like, if this is like what it's supposed to be like I don't want any more kids. Like, I don't know how people do this. This is ridiculous. I don't like feeling this way, but like all the things that I think are good for my health are no longer working. So what's going on? So that's kind of where I pivoted, and I switched from just teaching about healthy recipes and you should eat this because it has chicken and veggies and like a low fat dressing and whatever, to like really doing a deep dive in what health truly is and how it applies to us moms. Because yes, we're women, and yes, like we can, eat according to our cycle or whatever. But when it comes to fertility and pregnancy and postpartum and breastfeeding, we have unique needs that are different than just when we're getting our period and just living life. And so I really started doing a deep dive in nutrition specifically for moms and how it affects not only our babies that we're nurturing, but how it affects how we show up as moms. And it's been life-changing, not just for me, but for the mamas that I've worked with and the mamas that I've talked to online. So it's really empowering to know that step by step, God has led me to where I am today. My career started because of an impression from the Spirit. I was just like, I feel like I need to do this. Like, I feel like I have a calling. And I just kind of followed that. And as I got more information and things changed, I started to see a bigger vision in what I could do to help other moms. And I really feel like God has led me where I am today with the skills and talents that I have to bless as many moms as possible. And it's really humbling to know that God has been a part of my journey every step of the way.
Yeah, it is really humbling because then, and it also takes the pressure off. I don't know if you feel this too. This is not a podcast episode, by the way, listeners. This is not a podcast episode about becoming a business owner, but let me just tell you, it's just, there's going to be so much striving when you get into business on your own of like striving and performance. And when you realize it's not on your shoulders, you're like, oh, well, God's got the wheel. Like, and he is good and his intentions for me are good. And so I don't have to strive anymore. I don't have to show up for anyone except for him. And there's just like so much freedom in that. And like you said, empowerment. But as a side tangent, I heard from part of your story that you went from this place of this is kind of happening to me, like postpartum happened to me, this baby happened to me, to a place where you now took action. And on the other side of it, now are helping other people, which has to feel so cool.
It is. It's so cool to be like, okay, like I have been able to take my experiences and do something with it. Not just like not have a sucky time the next time around,
Right.
but like pay it forward almost, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's super powerful. And I'm sure with that, part of the topic that we're going to be covering today is identifying some myths that women are told about the postpartum recovery period, specifically when it comes to our nutrition. Like, eat this, don't eat that, do this, don't do that, don't have sugar, don't have milk, don't have dairy, like da 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 da. There's like a bullet point list I feel like women can just gather from the dark interwebs that are sometimes helpful, but most often altogether are not. They're just really confusing and overwhelming. So today I'm excited to have you speak some clarity into those topics so that women can walk away from this episode after listening with empowerment and clarity to make decisions about their nutrition that will not only benefit them, right? Because one of the things we talk about here is training and health and fitness in motherhood is a ripple effect action. It doesn't just affect the mom, it affects the kids, it affects the spouse, it affects everyone, right? So we're all affected by when women take action to care for themselves, which I think is just it's really awesome. But before we dive into that, I want to hear something from you. What's something that's been life-giving for you in this season of motherhood?
This is going to sound so simple and almost like, wait, what? But for me, it has been my 5 minutes of fresh air and sunshine before I go wake up my kids. I'm not one of those 5 a.m. moms where I'm like waking up 2 hours before my kids to exercise and do my hair and like all these other things. I'm literally waking up 5 minutes before my kids do. And thankfully, that's at 7:30 in the morning. My kids also like sleeping. So
Nice.
praise praise the Lord. But my 5 minutes of sunshine, I will get out of my bed and pee because I'm pregnant and that's the first thing I have to do. And then I will put on my robe and my shoes and I will walk straight outside before doing anything else. And I will just I call it sunflowering, where I just stand there and I align myself with the sun and my eyes are closed and I am listening to the birds chirp and I'm listening to the wind rustle the palm trees in my backyard and just like really taking in nature and that sunlight and just like having a moment of stillness. This has also been a really good time for me to connect with God and remember like, okay, the sun rises every single day. No matter if you make good choices or bad choices, no matter if you slept or not the night before, whatever, the sun always rises. God is always there. And having that moment of stillness for me has just really helped me collect myself so that I can show up better as a mom and also like regulate my hormones and all those other like health benefits that I could nerd out about. But really, I think it's been just connecting with nature and grounding and giving myself that moment of stillness with God before I start my day.
Starting the day with that level of stillness makes a huge impact, I would imagine, on the rest of your day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just started doing this like, I don't know, probably 6 or 8 weeks ago. Like I know the benefits of early morning sunlight. So I'd like open my blinds and like stare out my window. But like the difference between looking out my window and physically going outside and like being in the fresh air and the
Yeah.
wind and the sun is like so different. And it's just magical.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, what a great analogy. I'm actually going to pull from what you just said and make an analogy for our topic today. It's kind of like that difference between, you'd mentioned before we started recording, just like that difference between resting and recovering. Like you can just let the sunlight in, or you can be an active participant and go and stand in it. And so from that springboard, I want to talk about what are some of those myths that prevent women from really being an active participant in their recovery in that postpartum phase.
The biggest myth is exactly what you mentioned, and it's rest versus recovery. For decades, and still to this day, we're told, okay, you have your baby, you need to stay in bed. Don't lift a finger. You can lift your baby, but like don't lift your baby in the car seat. Don't lift a gallon of milk. Try not to walk really at all, especially if you had a C-section. And just really take those first couple weeks to just rest and like be in bed and do as little as possible. And then once you get to your 6 weeks, you're clear and you can do anything you want and you can just like jump right back into life. And I don't know about you, mama, listening, but if you've like done that, it actually doesn't feel good. Like if you've played that game where you just kind of do nothing or as little as possible for 6 weeks, and then you just like go 0 to 100, whether that's with physical intimacy or exercise or like anything else, you actually don't feel good. And you're like, well, I'm confused. I was told that if I waited 6 weeks, that like I'd be fine, and I'm not fine. So the difference between rest and recovery is that rest is passive and recovery is active. And there's a place for both. I'm not saying that like you shouldn't take time to be in bed and relax and sleep and all those things, because that's really important. But if that's all you're doing, you're not actually recovering and you're not actually healing. You're just doing less. And you're not giving your body those building blocks that it needs to actually like come back from 9 months of pregnancy and however long your childbirth was. So really being intentional about what you are doing in those first 6 to 8 weeks is going to make a huge difference, not only how you feel in the moment, but in your long-term recovery as well. When you do want to get back into the exercise that you like, when you are trying to keep up your milk supply while going back to work and doing school drop off and all these other things, and trying not to have like long-term health complications, like all these other things. What are you intentionally doing to be an active participant in your recovery so that you can come out on the other side and actually like be a person?
It's really good. It's not like a 0 to 100. Well, I want to talk a lot about I was going to say a little bit. I really want to talk a lot about, because that's probably what people want to know. Like, what are those building blocks? What are those active steps that we should be doing? What does that recovery versus rest practically look like? But before we dive into that and maybe a few other myths, I'd like to hear why do you think some of these myths can cause unnecessary stress or strain to moms? Like what are some of the ways believing this, or a couple of the other ones we'll dive into? What are some ways that's negatively affecting us?
Well, postpartum and breastfeeding is already hard enough, right? Your body isn't the same, and you're not sleeping a ton, and your whole life just changed, your routine changed. Like it's already hard enough. And you throw in misinformation. And I will also say well-intended advice that's coming from a good place, but like doesn't serve you, right? Because there's both. When you get this misinformation, it only adds to the stress, because then the misinformation turns into bad advice, and bad advice turns into poor outcomes. And then your first thought is, I must not be capable of producing enough milk. I must just be broken. And that's why my body doesn't feel good. Instead of saying, what if the advice that I got was wrong? What if the advice that I got isn't current and up to date? Or what if the advice that I got is only a piece of the puzzle and there's actually like a bigger picture going on that this comes from, and I just didn't get the whole picture, and that's why I don't feel good. So I think it compounds the stress, because we're going to assume that the poor results are because we're flawed or we can't amount to whatever goals we have. And I think another thing is that it takes 10 to 20 years for research to like actually be updated and for guidelines to change. I'll give a really good example. 10 years ago, in 2015, the American College of Anesthesiologists came out and said that they recommend women who are low risk actually eat food during labor. They came out and made an official statement that, hey, you can like do more than ice chips and whatever. Like eating a small meal will probably be beneficial to you if you are low risk and whatever. And you still hear 10 years later that you are not allowed to eat during labor.
Yeah.
It's not because the evidence isn't there or because the professionals like haven't come out and made a statement. It's just because it takes so long for the industry to actually get on board and then
Yeah.
implement the changes and make it a thing. So I think all of that together just like compounds the stress because you're like, well, is anything ever going to be different? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, that's really helpful to hear because often like I'm in the fitness space of all of this, and often so much of the information I hear is so antiquated where I'm like, that's actually the complete opposite of what they're finding out now. Like I was reading something the other day that was talking about potential muscle mass and at birth muscle mass in infants who were born with a mom who had strength training 2 to 3 times a week. And it showed like 9 times out of 10 at very significant amounts, the babies who were born from mothers who had strength trained regularly had higher amounts of lean muscle mass at birth and potential for lean muscle mass in like what they had only studied was the first 5 years of life. But like so wild if you think about the beneficial outcomes of that for our kids and how we often are told in pregnancy, like, oh, well, if you haven't been lifting, don't lift, just do what you've always been doing. And it's like, well, that's the time we should really be encouraging people to learn at a safe and like guided way how to strength train. So I love to hear like specific examples if you're able to of things in the nutrition space that you feel like are so antiquated when it comes to postpartum recovery. Like what's outdated? What's that like? This can kind of tie back to maybe some of those misinformation or those myths, but what is that from a nutrition perspective?
Man, I would say the first one is that you can get away with eating less food.
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure that like I make a difference between women who are breastfeeding and women who are not, because oftentimes we just kind of lump it all together. But there are women who choose not to breastfeed, and that's fine. So let's just say you're a mom, you give birth, and you don't plan on breastfeeding. You still need to be eating more food in those first 6 weeks, 8 weeks postpartum than you did in your third trimester of pregnancy. And the reason being is because it takes energy to build a human being. You know that. You just spent 9 months doing it. You're like, okay, I need calories because I'm building a human from scratch. Okay, now the human's out of your body, but your body's broken. It's got tears. It lost an entire organ. Your blood volume went up by 50%. And now your body has to like recalibrate how to do your normal blood volume, like all these other things. Your body has to literally rebuild itself after pregnancy and childbirth, regardless of whether or not you're breastfeeding. And it takes energy to do that. And so if you're eating less, if you are intentionally trying to limit your caloric intake, then that is only making your recovery more difficult. And it's only setting you up for down the road because your body's like, I need all of these building blocks. I need all of these nutrients to fix what 9 months of pregnancy just did, and I don't have enough. And so now I have to pick and choose. Is this nutrient going to go to rebuilding your vaginal canal, or is it going to go to making sure that your heart can pump enough blood?
Right.
Okay, well, if it's between those two, I'm going to choose your heart because your heart is essential for your survival. Your vaginal canal is not. Well, what if you want to have more kids? What if you want to have sex in 2 months? What if you want to comfortably put a tampon or a menstrual cup in, right? Like that's still part of our daily life. So I think one of the biggest myths is that you don't need as much food. And that just simply is not true. I try and remind my mamas that food is information. Yes, food is energy. But if you can like remind yourself that food is information, then that helps you really understand, okay, what information am I giving my body? Am I telling my body that there's not enough to go around? And so it has to like divide and conquer and do with less? Am I telling my body that, sure, there's enough calories, but a lot of it's from processed food. And so it's not very nutrient dense. And so we're still kind of in a deficit, even if the calories might be there. Like, what information am I giving my body with the food that I'm eating?
I think that that's a really good point too, is that you cannot be in a caloric deficit. Because I think some women here, especially women who have been like really, really good. I have a few clients who are like really, I hate to use good and bad because it has like a moral connotation. But this is the words that they would say. They would say like, I've been really good throughout pregnancy and now postpartum, I just want to eat whatever I can again. Like bring the sushi back, bring the wine back, all these things because they've just felt so restricted for so long, which probably goes into some myths they had about pregnancy and nutrition and how quote unquote good they had to be good enough for a healthy baby. But I think a lot of that can be from that rebound where they're like, okay, I've been so restricted for so long. And it's like a horse out of the gate. They just want to run and have and experience that freedom again. And so I think that that's a really helpful distinction though between like, oh, well, I'm eating more calories, but you might be, I know everyone talks about calorie deficit, right? Calorie deficit all the time, but like, what about a micronutrient deficit, right? Like if you have a micronutrient deficit, you are going to feel that in your energy. You're going to feel that in many other aspects. You had mentioned kind of pulling from those like adequate or pulling from inadequate places for necessary needs for survival. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like how that affects our energy, how that affects our gut health, how that affects like even fertility moving forward, right? Like what are some of the negative impacts that undereating can have in that postpartum period?
Oh, goodness. Literally everything. If you trying to come up with a good analogy, let's say you have a 100-piece Lego set and you build the Lego set, and then your toddler comes over and smashes the Lego set. And while you're trying to pick up the pieces, you don't realize that 11 of them went missing.
Hmm.
Your toddler, wanted to go throw them somewhere or eat them. I don't know.
Hmm.
But you're now trying to rebuild this Lego masterpiece with 11 pieces that are missing.
Hmm.
You could probably still build it in a way that like you could tell what it is. Let's
Hmm.
say it was a castle. You're like, yeah, it still looks like a castle, but maybe like there's one less window or the door doesn't open or there's like other minute things, I don't know, that just aren't there. You could get away with being like, yeah, like I built it, but it's missing stuff. And when it came time to actually like put the pieces together, you're like, oh, that piece that I had last time, I don't have that anymore. So does that mean that I have to like take a piece from somewhere else and put it here to make sure that like this corner of the castle is still structurally sound? Or
Hmm.
can I get away with like leaving that empty and it might just like look a little bit different later? Right. This is obviously like a very, very, very simple example, but that's kind of like what your body's trying to do during postpartum recovery
Hmm.
if you simply don't eat enough. You'll still have a body that looks like a functioning body. You'll still look like a woman. You'll still look like a mom, but it's not until later down the line when you're trying to keep up your milk supply at 6 months postpartum when you're also trying to lift heavy weights or um you want to try again for your next baby 18 months down the road and you don't realize that some of those building blocks that never came back
Hmm.
18 months ago are actually essential building blocks that you need to
Hmm.
make sure that fertility is where it should be. And then you're like, I got pregnant so easy last time. What's going on this time? My period's
Hmm.
back. I'm not breastfeeding anymore. Like what's going on? And and I don't say any of this to be like shame on you or it's your fault or it's no wonder you're having a hard time. That's not what I'm saying. It's more just like a perspective shift of food is information. And if we start off our postpartum recovery with a lack of information, we probably might not see the impact of that until way later when something important comes up and we're like, why is this hard? Why is this
Hmm.
not working? Why do I not feel good? And that applies to not only our fertility, but like you said, our gut health. The gut microbiome actually changes during pregnancy to be in a naturally inflammatory state.
Hmm.
We have a weakened immune system. The good versus bad bacteria ratio is shifting. And part of that is to support baby and make sure that baby stays safe
Hmm.
while they're in utero. But if we don't restore the balance that's supposed to be there when we're not pregnant anymore, then we're going to be left with a gut that is still inflamed and weakened and missing some good bacteria. And then you wonder why you have gas and bloating and constipation and why certain foods seem to affect your milk supply, but they're healthy foods. You're like, I
Hmm.
don't understand. Well, it's
Mm-hmm.
because your gut can't handle the foods that you're eating, right? You think about our mental health. Um, there's the gut brain axis. There's essentially three roads that go from our gut to our brain and two roads that go from our brain to our gut. So there's more going up than
Mm-hmm.
what's coming down. And if you are nutrient deficient or you have poor gut health, that's sending more information up to your brain that, like, hey, I don't have enough to make sure that you can focus or regulate your emotions or, have the desire to do something or want to be with your partner, like all these other things. It has a trickle effect. And what I've seen is that as we've gone on, we've just been told that that's normal. It's normal to have brain fog. It's
Mm-hmm.
normal to have low libido. It's normal. Okay, it's not normal. There's a lot of women that are like that, but that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that that's how it's supposed to be. I
Yeah.
know that that was a very long-winded answer, but hopefully you can kind of see how it all ties together and it stems from a lack. And if you're approaching postpartum with this mentality of how much how little can I eat and get away with it,
Mm-hmm.
that's where the problem is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really helpful. And long-winded answers are my favorite. So those, thank you. So good. Yeah, we talk a lot about body image here at Strong After Birth because I think it plays a massive role in our postpartum recovery of how bounce back culture tries to pressure us of like exercise more, eat less, and that's a recipe for fat loss. And I think there's so much nuance missed out on that. And I think you're right. Like I really do think that that phrase, that culture, that pressure does so much more harm than good on us in our long term. And I think it kind of creates this like perfectionist mentality of like, if you're not doing it as quickly as so and so, then you're not doing it right. And we miss out on the information our body is giving us because we're saying this is how it's supposed to work rather than listening to how our body is working at the time, which is like so powerful, right? Like God designed our bodies with so many checks and balances to help us stay healthy. Like that's such a good gift. Yes, we are in a broken world and those checks and balances don't always work, but I think more often than not, I'm sure you agree from your experience that like the effects of diet culture can throw those natural checks and balances off. And so we hear that we're hungry and we're like, no, I can't be hungry. So we don't honor that hunger cue. Or we feel like we need to move, but we're like, oh no, I shouldn't be moving, and then we can like create a lot of stiffness and joint pain and additional low back pain that, people are already experiencing. So that's really helpful. Well, I'm sure everyone wants to know, like you had mentioned, like how these myths and misconceptions can create really a deep sense of lack. Like we are the ones who are lacking. So, what are some of those action steps? What nutrients, changes, lifestyle factors do affect our milk supply and can kind of promote recovery, like we talked about, in the postpartum phase?
If we're trying to be specific about nutrients, I would say one of the biggest ones is protein. Not just from a sense of like satiety, because we hear that a lot. Oh, if you just eat more protein, then like, you'll make sure that you're full and you won't overeat, right? That's kind of the connection, at least in the fitness industry that I see.
Yeah.
One of my favorite facts about protein is there's an amino acid. An amino acid is just an essential building block that's in protein. There's an amino acid called tryptophan, and tryptophan is the building block of serotonin, which is our feel good hormone. It's the hormone that you always hear about, like, oh, if you have depression, you really just have like a lack of serotonin. So when we're not eating enough protein, it's then affecting our mood, and that affects our milk supply because all of a sudden we're not enjoying ourselves. We are not feeling bonded with our baby. We don't have the desire to take care of ourselves or to be involved with anyone. So we withdraw and then we become resentful.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that seems weird, like, wait, but you're not talking about like milk supply and like pumping and all that stuff. But what I really want your listeners to understand is that your milk supply is a reflection of your overall health.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a matter of just nurse more or just pump more, although that is important. it really comes down to your health. And so when we're talking about nutrients that support our milk supply, I always say protein.
Yeah.
Protein keeps you full. It gives you those amino acids to boost your mood and take care of your brain. And it also, when you have food sources that are high in protein, they're often really rich in minerals like
Mhm.
iodine and zinc and selenium and all these other ones that are really important to not only our health, but to baby's health.
Mhm.
And so, if you're focusing on food sources of protein like high quality animal meats and full fat dairy and eggs, then you are going to notice a difference in your milk supply because not only are you fortifying the milk supply with enough nutrients, but you're also taking care of your body at the same time. And that means milk supply is easier.
Yeah, that's really good. I liked how you started from that. I coach my clients through something called the pyramid of prioritization. And it's like, these are the big factors that make a big difference. And like, this is what you want to start to focus on the bottom. And then we can talk about some of those other like fine tuning things. Like everyone hops on that like cold plunge and red light sauna and all of those other things that may make a difference, but like their percentage of impact compared to eating more protein, eating at like maintenance calories and or above maintenance calories for breastfeeding. Like I think those things play such a big role. So I love that you started there. How much protein do you typically recommend either a postpartum breastfeeding woman or postpartum non-breastfeeding woman?
I personally like to go off of a percentage. I know a lot of trainers will do it like per pound of body weight or per kilogram of body weight. And I know that there's also like science and research that supports that. My approach is more principle based
Mhm.
of, okay, yes, we want to be eating enough for how much we weigh, like how big we are. But we also need to be talking about our lifestyle and all of the other things that impact our health, not just like our weight and our activity level.
Mhm.
So I recommend my mamas shoot for about 30% of their calories come from protein. And, if you don't want to do math, if you don't want to count macros, if you don't want to track your protein, then just look at your plate every time you eat and ask yourself if a third of your plate is protein. And that doesn't mean that it has to be chicken every single time, right? You could have some eggs over here and some beans over here and some bone broth over here. And when you put it all together,
Mhm.
it's about a third of the calories that you're eating is protein.
Mhm.
If you do track and you do want numbers, I recommend no less than 120 grams of protein a day. If that sounds absolutely overwhelming, I have a free 2-week meal plan that literally did all the math for you. Over 20,000 people have downloaded this meal plan, by the way. So it's a really great tool. But yeah, I'd say no less than 120 grams if you're postpartum, regardless of whether or not you're breastfeeding. When I breastfeed, I'm usually eating around 140
Mhm.
grams of protein. And my pre-pregnancy body weight is usually about 120 pounds, and I'm only 5'4". So objectively, I'm not that big of a woman, but it just like it takes care of my body. So I would say at least 120 grams or 30% of your daily intake of calories.
It's helpful to have those two different variances of, I know a lot of moms who I've coached through and we're like, okay, tracking is not, it seems overwhelming. It seems like an extra, like you're already tracking the baby's sleep, you're tracking their poops, you're tracking everything. Like if tracking your own nutrition seems a little out of it, I like how you gave that, like just look at your plate is a third of that protein. That's really helpful. That's good. Any other lifestyle factors that you think of could contribute to that real recovery that's needed to where you are? I mean, once postpartum, always postpartum, right? But like you get past that 1 year mark or that 2 year mark where you're feeling good, you're feeling like quote unquote like yourself again. What are some other like lifestyle factors, nutrition changes you would encourage women to make?
I would say that one of the biggest ones is supporting your sleep. And
Mm-hmm.
I always get moms that look at me and they're like, but I don't sleep. Like I have an
Mm-hmm.
infant that needs to wake up all the time, or I have toddlers that have nightmares and need to go potty or whatever. And I get that our sleep is interrupted.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can focus on the quality of your sleep and supporting your circadian rhythm, that will dramatically impact your blood sugar levels during the day, thereby impacting what you choose to eat and how much you eat. and it will also dramatically impact your mood. So really making sure that you're supporting your circadian rhythm, doing this day one. Like, let's say I give birth tomorrow, right? Obviously, I'm not going to be sleeping for long stretches, and I'm probably not going to be sleeping a lot anyway, but am I getting my morning sunlight? Am I eating a big breakfast to lower my cortisol levels and tell my body, hey, you don't need to use cortisol for energy. You can use the food for energy for the rest of the day. You know, am I eating enough protein to support melatonin production? That's another reason we need protein is tryptophan is also a precursor for melatonin. And so if you're having a hard time sleeping and you're doing the sunlight and you're taking your magnesium and you have your 20-minute bedtime routine or whatever, and you still find yourself struggling with sleep, you probably just don't have enough natural melatonin in your body. And that tells me that you need to be eating more protein, high quality animal protein, right? So really focusing on supporting your circadian rhythm is going to be huge because cortisol itself is not bad. We need cortisol to wake up. We need cortisol to protect us when, you know, something scary comes up or we get that little rush of adrenaline. It's good in its time, but we don't want to have it in high doses all the time. And so finding ways to support the regulation of cortisol is going to impact every area of your life.
That's good. I like how you touch on specifically what supporting your circadian rhythms mean, because I think now circadian rhythms are a little bit more mainstream for most people who have been in health and fitness for a little bit. But I think it's good that you really identify what that means of like that melatonin before you go to bed and like your body producing that on its own and then not relying on a cortisol rush or like cups and cups of coffee to like get us going in the morning, but instead of like resting on those real food supplies that are going to give us the energy we need. About 4 months, a funny story, about 4 or 5 months after our son was born, we got rid of our TV. And I gotta tell you, it was one of the most healing, restoring, renewing decisions we ever made for our marriage, for our health, for parenthood, because we don't depend on it for entertainment. Like we read books now, we talk, we go for a walk, and it's just been so life-giving. And really when I think about my circadian rhythms, I'm like, yeah, I am so ready for bed by the time it's 8 o'clock because the sun's went down, you know, the sun's down and my body's like, all right, let's unwind, let's call it a day. And I think that natural rhythm is really God-given, right? Like the invention of the light bulb drastically changed our circadian rhythms to now where we are being exposed to blue light before bed. And that can change how we fall into a deep sleep, which is just, it really does make an impact on
I
us.
love that you brought that up. Is it like the TV in your room or like you just don't have a TV in your house?
Period. Actually,
Okay.
technically right now it's in our garage and I use it for clients who come to the house. Or if my husband has some friends over, they want to watch like football or soccer or something, they'll hang out in the garage. So now like it's not in our living room, it's not in our bedroom, it's out in the garage and it doesn't even have like, we don't have Netflix, we don't have Disney Plus, and it's so life-giving. It's so good. Like there's no question. Like we're not wondering if we're going to turn on a show for 2 hours. We're not frustrated at somebody else. We're not frustrated at one another because I'm like, I don't want to watch another episode, but you want to watch another episode. Like it was silly, the conversations we were having and how much it was affecting like our quiet times in the morning. I have a whole podcast episode on it, so I don't have to like totally rant about it, but super impactful, really restorative. And it was so well timed because thick of postpartum recovery, like that 3 to 4 month mark. So really, really helpful. I totally agree with you
Yeah.
there.
I love that. To the moms who are listening and they're like, I can't give up my TV. Like I need Bluey for my kids or whatever it is.
Right.
Or if you're like me and you watch like one episode after the kids go to bed before it's time for you to go to bed, I would add to that, just take if you have a TV in your room, like for you and your husband, I would take the TV out. That's
Yeah.
a rule that my husband and I had like since day one that we would never have a TV in our room. And it's been awesome because that
Yeah.
means our room is for sleep and sex. And it is so like restorative and like a place of peace.
Yeah.
And there's like no stimulation in there. So I think that's like a great in between. And I'm also going to call out the moms that like to scroll at 3 a.m. while they're breastfeeding or pumping. You need to stop. Like, I'm sorry, I'm going to give you some tough love. If you want to actually be able to sleep when it's time for you to sleep, even if you get interrupted, do not go on your phone while you're breastfeeding. Use those quiet moments to just keep your eyes half open and connect with your baby and however long it takes. And then as soon as you're done, you're back in bed. Like you don't need your phone. That is going to impact your circadian rhythm so much. And I thought of one more thing while you were talking about the lights, making sure that the first light you see when it's actually time to wake up, right? Let's say you're waking up at 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., but you're not starting your day till 7 or 8, whatever. Let the first light you see be natural light. My rule in my house is sunlight before screens. So we're not turning on the bathroom light. We're not turning on the kitchen light. We're not looking at our phones. We're not turning on the TV. Everyone's first light exposure when they start their day is natural light. And we try and see how long we can make it until we have to turn a light on. And sometimes I don't turn on any lights in my house until 6 o'clock at night. And it's awesome because we're using natural light all day long to support our circadian rhythm.
Like outside, but not outside.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's so cool. So let's say, I know you mentioned a couple things, but if a mom is coming to you and she's like, "Ah, and Brooke, like I'm in the thick of it. You've mentioned a lot of really good things. What's one thing that would make the biggest impact on her milk supply if she started doing it today?"
Minerals, hands down. We're told that we have to drink a lot while we're pregnant and breastfeeding, but hydration isn't just the amount of water. Hydration also is the amount of electrolytes that you have. And I'm not talking about Gatorade. Gatorade's a lie. Don't buy Gatorade or Powerade. Those are not electrolyte drinks. I'm talking about
Why do you say
salt.
that?
Pardon?
Why do you say that about Gatorade?
Gatorade is just sugar water with food dyes in it. And like, I actually did a reel about this if you're curious. There's like, at least from the research that I've done and what I've seen, there's guidelines about how much sodium, how much potassium, how much magnesium you actually need for it to be effective in your hydration and your overall health. And when you look at those numbers and you compare it to the quote electrolytes that are in Gatorade or Powerade or Pedialyte or any of those like common electrolyte drinks that we've been marketed to think, the nutrient levels are like next to nothing. Like there is nowhere near enough sodium in any of those drinks to actually rehydrate you. And there is almost zero potassium in there. And you need 3 times as much potassium as you do sodium. So when you look at those drinks are more for like your blood sugar. Like you've been exercising for an hour, your blood sugar's low. If you need like a quick pick me up so that you don't pass out, you're using the sugar from those drinks, not the electrolytes. So when I talk about electrolytes and I talk about minerals, I'm talking about like adding salt to your smoothies or adding salt to your water or adding cream of tartar, which is basically just potassium bicarbonate. It's pure potassium. Adding cream of tartar to your smoothie. Things like that, where you're intentionally adding in these minerals, they will fuel your cells at a cellular level. And so your cells are able to better send and receive messages from hormones. They're better able to do their jobs, whatever their job is. So you're going to have more energy. You're going to have less brain fog, less headaches. You're going to be more hydrated. Your body's going to know what to do with all the water that you're drinking. So I would say the biggest thing that you could do right now and see almost immediate results is minerals. I will have moms that are like, I've had low milk supply for months. I don't know what's going on. I've tried the oats. I've tried the protein. I've tried the this. I've tried eating more calories. I just can't figure it out. And I will tell them to go make my adrenal smoothie or to have like an actual electrolyte drink from a reputable brand. And they come back to me 24 hours later and they're like, I've never pumped so much milk in one session. Or my baby is like finally satisfied after they ate. And they're like, is it really that easy? I'm like, yeah, you just need salt. You just need more salt. You need more potassium. So if you want to learn more about electrolytes and the role that they play in your health, I have an entire blog post all about it that breaks down each electrolyte. I talk about all of the brands that I do and don't recommend, why I do or don't recommend them, to really give you that resource to better understand how to help. And then I also have my adrenal smoothie that literally, I'm not trying to brag, but it literally has changed lives. Like moms tell me that they have never had so much energy than when they have their adrenal smoothie first thing in the morning.
Natural.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. Really does make a difference, especially if it's that, like, circling back, if it's those like building blocks that are missing, it would make a huge impact if like you are specifically adding those things back in, right? And then to go full circle, I mean, how much are we told? Like reduce sodium intake, reduce fat intake, right? Like, and so I think that it's really powerful to actually identify, actually, these things are not bad. Sure, you can take anything to a bad level. I think any good thing can become a God thing, but our body needs those things, and all things are from the Lord. So that's so cool. Last thing, some words of wisdom and or grace that you would give somebody who is in the thick of it, struggling with all of the things in motherhood, and her milk supply is not what she wants it to be. She feels like she's trying all the things. What are some words of wisdom or grace that you would offer her as she takes some of these things that we've learned today and starts to apply them and goes forward on her health journey?
First, Mama, I would say that the fact that you are trying everything and that you are so aware of your body and what your goals are speaks volumes about you as a mom. I know you might not see the results that you want right now, but please give yourself a pat on the back and say, but I care so much and I'm doing the best that I can with what I have and what I know. And that is already like doing so much more good than you realize. So take a deep breath and be like, okay, I'm doing good. The next thing I would say is if you feel like you're trying all the things and you just can't quite figure out what's going on, you can't figure out why you don't feel good or why your milk supply isn't where it's supposed to be, I would just bring it back to the basics and start with the basics. A lot of times, like you said, we can get caught up in the cold plunge and the red light and the foam rolling and the fancy supplements and all these other things. And those are all good, but they don't do much if the foundations aren't in place. So I want you to sit down and really, really be honest with yourself. Are you eating 3 meals a day? Are you actually hydrated? And are you actually drinking as much water as you think you are? Are you actually waking up refreshed, even if your sleep was interrupted? Like I always give the example, after I had my second baby, my husband was deployed when she was 6 weeks old. I had a 2.5-year-old toddler, a 6-week-old baby, and my husband was deployed to the other side of the world. So I was on my own. And I had every excuse in the book to not feel good and to not sleep well. And despite having 3 exclusively breastfeeding sessions a night and having 2 kids on my own, I woke up every morning with energy. I woke up with clarity. I woke up refreshed and feeling like, okay, I got some rest. It's time to start a new day. And that's because I was focusing on the fundamentals. So I don't want you to assume that like you're just doomed to not feel good. So are you getting really good sleep? And obviously you've probably gone through all these check boxes of I'm eating, I'm sleeping, I'm right. You're doing all the things and you still don't feel good. Then I would see if you have room in your budget to invest in someone who can dig deeper for you. A lot of times it takes an outsider that's an expert to look in and just be like, hey, did you know that you're actually not eating as much fat as you realized? Or, hey, did you know that you actually need twice as much salt as you're eating? Or did you know that if you just ignore your phone for the first hour of your day, that you'll sleep better at night? Or whatever it is, right? Having that expert come in and just kind of do an evaluation is going to make a huge difference. I'm not talking about a pediatrician or your OB. Not that they're not experts, but I feel like we have gotten to a place where we assume that our pediatrician is our go-to for everything with our kids, and our OB is the person for everything with us.
Yeah.
They're not jack of all trades.
Yeah.
And when it comes to nutrition and lifestyle, that's not their expertise. So I would find someone like myself or a functional practitioner or, a lactation consultant that can come in and really look in that specific area of your life and be like, okay, I think I know what's going on. And if you have the room in your budget to do that, it is a million times worth your investment.
Yeah. And to know it's like a short-term thing, right? Like oftentimes it really just is that, hey, you've got a headlight out. Like, hey, you didn't know this, but like you have a headlight out and let's fix the headlight and you can be on your merry way. It doesn't have to be this endless thing, which I think is helpful. I think for women as they approach that, asking for help can be scary. And you're spot on. I have a client who's an OB, so I feel very safe saying this. Like they have only had on average one class, if only one seminar on nutrition when it comes to pregnancy and postpartum. And so that's just not what their expertise is. Like you're spot on. And same thing when it comes to like nutrition for our kids. I've asked my pediatrician, I love my pediatrician, but I've asked her questions about my son's nutrition and, some of the changes I want to make and those types of things. And she's like, yeah, I mean, you're doing such a great job. It's just not really a whole lot of like practical advice. But I'm like, yeah, like I feel like I'm doing a okay job. I kind of want to do a good job. I want to do a great job. So I think that's a helpful perspective also to give women. Well, Brooke, thank you so much for your time, your insights. You have really just loaded a lot of practical advice into this episode. So thank you so much for that. If somebody wants to get in contact with you, what are some ways they can reach out? You'd mentioned a cookbook at some point, an adrenal smoothie at some point. So I can put those in the show notes. And what's the best way for someone to get in contact with you if they did want to reach out?
I'm really active on Instagram. My DMs are always open. My website is thewellnourishedmama.com. That's where you'll find all of my research-backed articles about electrolytes like we talked about, or my adrenal smoothie. And those resources are all free. I also have a podcast where I talk even more than I have on this episode, and I get really deep into the nitty-gritty so that you can have a place to refer back to. And then if you're looking for like a really transformative experience where you're like, okay, I've got the free advice, I kind of need a little bit more, but like I don't want to invest in a one-on-one, don't really have the budget for that, then my cookbooks and my master classes are great options. I have a postpartum recovery cookbook that takes you through the first 6 weeks postpartum. It explains what the heck is going on with your body, where you should be at each week of your recovery, and what nutrients, building blocks, information your body needs to actually feel good and recover. So I have that cookbook. And then I also have a masterclass called the Confident Mama Masterclass that focuses on healthy and sustainable weight loss postpartum, whether or not you're breastfeeding, but it teaches you those foundations that are really going to move the needle the most and kind of flips the script about what you've been taught about feeling good in your body postpartum. So I've got tons of resources, tons of free things. I've got some things that are more of an investment, but they're well worth the investment if you want a transformative experience.
Awesome. We'll be sure to link those in the show notes. So
I want to leave you with one of the most helpful tools that you can have when you start to focus on building hip strength, and that is a timeline. I remember using the pregnancy tracking app and seeing the timeline of baby's development and baby's milestones and thought it was just so cool, but really helpful to have perspective of how long it takes to grow. And in the same way, as we work at building strength, it's not an on or off switch. It takes time to build muscle. And so I just want to give you this timeline that on average, when clients start working on hip strengthening exercises, it can take anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks before they start feeling pain-free. Now, typically after the first 2 to 3 exercise sessions, they tend to feel a little bit better by doing some of those glute side steps or the glute bridges or even the single leg balance hold. But it can take time to get to a place where we feel that strength and notice it outside of our workouts. So I want to leave you with that timeline so that you can allow yourself some grace and to know this is going to take a little time, but that time is so worth it. And if you want to get ahead of rebuilding your core postpartum and start working on your core strength now for what you'll need in those weeks following delivery, then be sure to check the show notes for my 3-day core restore. That is a free guide loaded with powerful exercises specifically designed for postpartum and pregnant women who are looking to have a better relationship with their core strength and have a strong and stable hips as they go throughout pregnancy and postpartum. Until next time, friends, stay strong. All the love, Coach Laura.